How to do, y'all? Tables here. I have another build guide for 3.20, the Juggernaut Righteous Fire build. This build is very tanky. Uh, Now, I usually do minions. I tend to stay in my lane and just do minion stuff. Uh, but I thought with minions being what they were last league, I kind of wanted to try something a little bit different, and this is kind of what I ended up doing, and it honestly it performs really well. I was very surprised. Took a bit of trial and error to get everything, like kind of just to learn the ins and outs of Righteous Fire. And honestly, what happened was we ended up with a pretty incredible mapper. It is not a bosser by any means. It can do bosses, and it will perform. But it does take, especially early when you're not fully solidified in your damage. It does take a little while to kill the bosses. I'm going to be upfront and honest with y'all. Uh, if you're looking for a bossing character, this ain't it. Go ahead and move on. But if you're looking for a pretty incredible mapper and a very tanky mapper and tanky bosser, uh, this is the one for you. This is definitely the one for you. So I'm gonna stop talking. We're gonna get into the skill tree. So this is our skill tree. It's a level 95 skill tree. This is the current character as it sits right now in Kalandra. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do with this build is I wanted to try and get started with Righteous Fire as soon as humanly possible. And we're actually, the way that I've laid the tree out, we're able to do that before your first ascendancy. And I did this. I did the ascendancy as Righteous Fire. We were pretty stinking tanky. Even that early on, the damage, obviously, it's based on level, so it's not the greatest. But if you are interested in getting through Righteous Fire as soon as humanly possible, I have figured out a way to do it. No, no uniques, no required HPS on gear, though it doesn't hurt. But some of the highlights: prismatic skin, pretty big. We take champion of the cause with sovereignty to really kind of bump up our reservation efficiency with our skills and our auras, because we do run quite a bit of auras. And then we just really we prioritize health, a little bit of fire damage, and armor, and determination mastery. We don't have a ton of masteries, but we do have a few, and most of them are pretty much damage based. And then we do have one cluster jewel, which we will go over when we hit the gear. In this current tree, this is level 95, and then we have an early RF tree as well. As far as our ascendancies go, you if you're going to be a mapper, purely mapping, which is what I did this for, and which is what I think most people tend to do on League Start instead of just straight bossing. You could theoretically you could get rid of this unyielding, and if you wanted to be quite a bit more tanky, you could go unrelenting. I think I just kind of prefer unyielding. The extra AOE is very nice, and we do have quite a few endurance charges, so it does lend itself very nice to mapping in particular. Um, Now, if we're talking about what you should go first for your ascendancy, uh, untiring is 110% what you need to be going as your very first ascendancy. I went untiring, unflinching, unyielding, and then the last thing that I got was my unbreakable for my Uber lab. Um, you guys do you. Softcore trade, obviously I was okay going unbreakable as the last one. If you are in a hardcore, I would recommend going untiring, unbreakable, unflinching, and unrelenting, and just dropping unyielding just as a whole. If you choose to do this in hardcore, I leave that up to you. Okay, let's get into the skills. Okay, so here we are at the skills. So this whole POB is basically from league start to the mid game. And in between that, you're gonna be dropping some currency, 100%. Uh, I would consider the true end game to be like like a top tier helmet craft, so you can turn your 4 link into a 6 link. That is not in this POB, and I probably will not be pushing this POB any further than it is because as it stands right now, this can pretty much clear the entirety of the game except for the uber bosses, right? So I don't really feel the need to push it beyond that. But with that said, body armor, righteous fire. If you can pick up a vow, if you end up making quite a bit of currency, I encourage you to do so. It really is a pretty large boon to our damage. We run Awakened Elemental Focus, Consecrated Effect, Life Tap, Awakened Burning Damage, and Awakened Swift Affliction. And we're running Life Tap because we are also running Life Tap on Fire Trap, and because we're spending because we're spending on Fire Trap, we're also getting the damage boost on Righteous Fire. So we're kind of double dipping between the two. Now for our helmet, we have Fire Trap, Awaken Swift, Trap and Mind Damage, and Life Tap. Our auras are Malevolence, Determination, Purity of Fire, and Enlighten. I would dump probably Malevolence until you grab an Enlighten, and then you can comfortably roll all the auras that we need. Purity of Fire, pretty much non-negotiable. We're really trying to get our max fire res as high as humanly possible. Very important. We're sitting at about 89% fire res right now, which is really good. Our boots, shield charge, combustion, faster attacks, and life tap. We're able to put combustion on here because we do have added fire damage to one of our pieces of gear. And because of that, we are technically dealing fire damage with shield charge. Therefore, we are able to apply ignites with fire trap and ignites with the added fire damage from our gear, from shield charge, and all that equates to you getting negative 10% fire resistance, which is pretty nice. We love that. And then we have Molten Shell, level 20, just self cast. We have level 19 Vitality. Now you can run it this a different way, but I prefer to just have straight up Vitality. That's just me. Instead of reserving our life for an increased effect, I prefer to just run straight up. And then we are also running Defiance Banner, Flammability, and Infernal Cry. Now, there is a mastery that can cover enemies in ash when they hit you, 20% chance. I find that Infernal Cry is a much more reliable way to get ash on the enemies around us. And it has the bonus of them exploding and dealing damage. And pretty much it just feels nice. You know, the entire Infernal Cry, it's not, there's only like one part of it that really synergizes with our build. But since we are not necessarily socket starved, I decided to run it, and you know, I just kind of use it when I need to use it, especially on bosses. That every little bit helps on bosses, especially with Righteous Fire. So that's our skills. I will not be doing a leveling skill section on this build because this really doesn't change in any fashion, right? On the other builds, you're using other skills, and then a bunch of other stuff is swapped. This is very all of this is cut and dry and non-negotiable. The only thing that you're going to be using, which we'll go over in the leveling section, are other skills until you can get Righteous Fire online, which is around Act 2 or late 2 or early 3. So we're going to go over the items next. Okay, here we are at the gear. Your first chase item is going to be your Void Scepter. This is fully crafted, right? And I will leave a link to how to craft this in the description below. This cost me about 2 to 3 div, And this is pretty much going to take you all the way to the end game. There's only one other thing that might be a little bit better, and it's very expensive. So I think this is your first chance at a good solid chase item. It's going to do massive amount, like it's going to be a huge boon to your damage. This is one of the first things that I go for. There, we also have our shield, Sapphire's Flame. Now, alternatively, for a while, I was using Rise of the Phoenix early on, and then because I wanted more fire res, we ended up switching to Sapphire's Flame. Uh, this is what I ran with pretty much through the entirety of the end game. This is a fantastic shield. A good one is decently cheap, probably 40C, and this can be corrupted to a few things. I don't necessarily feel like it's like a must to corrupt or double corrupt. I personally just left it. I found a good one. I left it as it is. Are the rest of our helms, and you'll find on all these pieces what I went for my implicits, for my eater and my searing exarch implicits, and we just went for any kind of chaos res or life regen, resists, and just pure life, and picked up any intelligence and stuff on rings, and pretty much just used our gear to get what we needed left over from the skill tree. And all these things, these are all like, this is nothing. This gear is not very expensive. This piece right here is hands down your most expensive piece, period. Like, these boots come from Eater of Worlds, they're nothing. They're like a chaos, maybe, maybe 3 to 4 for like a perfectly rolled one. Then we have a plus fire necklace, pretty decent damage recouped his life ring, pretty solid vermilion ring. These are both just handcrafted with dexterity essences, and we did it. Rolled some good stuff, called it good. We are running an abyssal Stygian vise. I think we rolled a strength essence on this. I can't remember exactly. Uh, pretty much every league I roll essences on my to get my rings and my belt set up. This, I believe we found this we found this fracture and we just rolled. I'm pretty sure that I spam rolled alterations until I got the 80% if you killed recently, which helps in just an incredible amount. As far as our jewel goes, this is what we went with: Burning Bright, Disorienting Display, Master of Fire, and we pretty well picked up everything along the way. And then we have our Energized Armor. These are super cheap, but try to find some with 20%. I kept corrupting them until I got Corrupted Blood. So that means we became immune. And then this allows us to just get so much armor. I mean, absolutely ridiculous amounts of armor. We have like 100K right now. It's pretty nuts. With not a ton of investment, by the way. And then for our large cluster, we have the Forbidden Flesh, Sun's Light, which gives us 25% fired out multi, chance to ignite, and damage penetrates. We don't really care about damage penetrates. It doesn't really do anything for us. Those two were not very expensive. There are other ones that are far more expensive, but being, you know, somewhat budget, I wanted to keep it fairly cheap. And it really, I mean, both of these were like a div and a half, maybe. And they do the job. Now, this, however, this is a different story. This is like, this is probably like a 10 to 12 div jewel. And I got really lucky on this. Uh, this had max life and fire damage. And I regaled into fired out multi, and then EX slammed into damage over time. This is not a very typical outcome, obviously, but these are the stats that you're going to want to be looking for on pretty much any of the jewels that you have. And so let's say you can't afford these Forbidden Fleshes and Forbidden Flames right now. You can always find other jewels like this to put in their replacement, and then you can just take them out whenever you get the cash to get forbidden jewels. And so that's our gear. Nothing too crazy. It's definitely an investment, especially your Val Righteous Fire. That's going to be quite expensive, but it's very much worth it. Or you could save it for another build. I'll leave that up to you guys. Now I want to talk about damage and defense numbers, which are looking pretty pretty good. Not bad at all. Our combined DPS, right? Our ignites are doing almost half a mil. You know, our burning ground is 1.1, 3.1 from the righteous, and our combined is just really, really solid. And that's only really going to improve, especially with flammability and things like that, not being being much better as a hex, especially versus bosses. Uh, Now this is obviously this is like 5 million map DPS. Uh, it gets considerably lower on pinnacle bosses, 2.8. But I see this number going up a fair amount, especially when we're talking about the new hexes. So we have 100k armor, tons of physical damage reduction, which also translates into elemental damage reduction from our ascendancy. And we have quite a bit of regen at about 1,000 per second. And it just really makes for an incredibly tanky character. Obviously, you'll need the enlightened because the mana is pretty tight. But if you look, I mean, just mapping alone, like our effective hit pool is 147,000. That's pretty crazy. We are very close to max chaos, which is why it's so much lower. Obviously, the ascendancy does not help us with chaos, but I would implore you guys to please try to find places where you can increase your max chaos hit by getting chaos resistance. You will thank me later, and it will make the entire experience of playing Jugg a lot smoother. Now, I want to talk about leveling. So, if you go to the tree and then you go down and you go early RF, this is the pathing that you're going to take. This is the pathing that you're going to take that is going to allow you to do Righteous Fire very, very early. Much earlier than Inquisitor. In fact, I was doing Righteous Fire before I did my first Ascendancy, probably around 32, maybe 30. It just depends on the type of gear that you get. Any kind of regen on your gear is going to help, obviously. And then once you get your first Ascendancy untiring, and you get that health regen percentage, it really is just going to benefit you a lot. Now, these nodes essentially will be taken away once you get your Righteous Fire, fully established. But they're not a huge loss. It's not a big deal. But early on, this is the best, hands down, the best way to start Righteous Fire right out the gate. And I leveled this Righteous Fire all the way through the axe. It was great. It felt great. Tanky. Yeah, that's my recommendation for leveling. And then once you do all this stuff, then you can just go back. Then you can just go back to your normal default tree. And once you feel like you are at a spot where you don't necessarily need these life regen nodes, then you can dump them. And I would say once you get over a certain amount of max fire res, then I would start considering taking these out and putting them, like, say, in a Holy Fire, or once you get up to Heart of Flame and Breath of Flames. And yeah, so that's the leveling. You can do literally whatever you choose. I tend to run Perforate with added fire damage all the way through the axe. But like I said, I ran two-handed. Any two-handed melee skill should work perfectly for you guys on your journey up to the early 30s before you get Righteous Fire set up. So I leave that up to you guys. I'm not going to tell you what to level with. I just know what I like to level with, and Perforate, I'm kind of a big fan of. Throwing some added fire, and just kind of blow and go. Any other subsequent supports that may increase your damage, Throw those sons of bitches in there. Now, as far as build defining uniques, this build really doesn't have too many. I personally would say that I would not run this build without Legacy of the Fury. Luckily for us, it's extremely cheap. This instantly makes mapping. It really is like night and day. This is an incredible pair of boots for us, and it should be one of the first upgrades you look to make while you're mapping. And I say that because it is so cheap. Even early game, like people just throw these boots away. And it really just works so well. Rise of the Phoenix, grab that before Saffel's Frame. It's not a must have, but it will improve your build. And Rise of the Phoenix is generally pretty much every league been a 1 to 2 chaos shield. And it is going to be better for you than any rare shield that you have at the time. Energized armor, another very cheap unique. These are mildly build defining. You don't have to have these, but they do enhance your experience a great deal. So I wouldn't necessarily call them build defining like a carrying golem unique. But if you want to enhance your experience with RF Jugg, I highly recommend that you guys be on the lookout for some cheap Rise of the Phoenixes, Legacy of Furies, and Energized Armors. And that's it. That's the build. 5 million DPS. This is actually getting a buff because of the Hex, and boss buffs, albeit not massive, but technically a buff. And I think a lot of people are going to be interested in playing Jugg RF compared to Inquisitor because Inquisitor got an ascendancy nerf somewhat. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this build guide. And if you have any questions, please drop a comment down below and I will get to your answer as soon as I can, and or join the Discord. We have a lot of people in there that play the builds, and we always end up discussing things or tweaking things. And if you guys are interested in being part of the community, I would love to have you. And as always, if you guys liked it, please like, comment, and if you feel so inclined, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. And I will see you guys Friday. I'm excited. I can't wait. Y'all have a good rest of the week. I hope it goes by quick. And I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.